The story of the Teton Dam begins not with disaster, but with a problem as old as farming itself: controlling water. For decades, farmers in Idaho's upper Snake River Plain faced a constant struggle. Spring snowmelt would swell the Teton River, causing destructive floods that washed away crops, while the hot, dry summers that followed threatened to leave the soil parched. The idea of building a dam to regulate water had been discussed as early as 1932, but it took decades of studies and political debate before serious action was taken. In 1962, the U.S. Bureau of Reclamation officially approved the project. The Teton Dam was designed to be a modern engineering marvel, 305 feet high, 3,100 feet long, and constructed as an earthen dam with a 17-mile-long reservoir capable of holding nearly 290,000 acre-feet of water. Beyond flood control, the dam promised reliable irrigation for farms and hydroelectric power for local communities. Construction began in 1972, employing a large workforce that moved over 10 million cubic yards of earth and rock. The dam's core was made of compacted silt, intended to be watertight, while layers of sand, gravel, and rock on either side would provide stability. From a distance, it looked like a man-made mountain, solid and permanent. Despite the promise, warning signs appeared early. Environmental groups raised concerns about the impact on the Teton River's trout population, while geologists highlighted instability in the canyon's bedrock. Cracks and fissures in the volcanic rock beneath the foundation were noted, but many engineers believed these could be managed, yet the very ground the dam rested on was deeply flawed, setting the stage for the tragedy to come. The Teton Dam's foundation rested on volcanic rock, a type of welded ash flow tuff left from ancient eruptions millions of years ago. While it looked solid, the rock was riddled with deep vertical fractures, some so large that engineers could not determine their full depth. To address this, the Bureau of Reclamation installed a grout curtain, drilling hundreds of holes into the canyon floor and walls, and filling them with cement slurry to seal cracks. Yet the fractures were far more extensive than anticipated, and the grout could not completely fill them. Adding to the danger was the dam's core material, a fine-grained, wind-blown silt called loess. Though compacted to form a supposedly watertight barrier, this silt was highly susceptible to erosion. Once water found a path, it could carry away tiny particles, gradually carving channels deep within the dam. This process, known as piping, created an internal erosion loop. The more water flowed, the more silt was washed away, and the larger the channels became. By the spring of 1976, as snowmelt filled the reservoir faster than expected, the combination of fractured rock and vulnerable core created the perfect conditions for failure. Water began seeping through the unsealed cracks beneath the dam, slowly reaching the loess core. Engineers noticed small leaks, but the scale of the threat was underestimated. This hidden internal erosion was invisible from the surface, making it impossible to detect the disaster growing inside the dam. Even minor warning signs, such as small wet spots on the downstream face, were treated as routine and manageable. The flaws in both the foundation and the core were compounded by human overconfidence, as many believed the design was sufficient for the reservoir's immense pressure. By June 5, 1976, these concealed vulnerabilities would align catastrophically, setting the stage for one of the most devastating man-made floods in U.S. history. By the morning of Saturday, June 5, 1976, the Teton Dam showed signs of imminent failure. Early that day, a new leak appeared on the downstream face of the dam, this time muddy instead of clear, indicating that the internal silt core was being eroded. Within hours, a second muddy leak formed, and by 9:30 a.m., a large, dark, wet patch had developed, rapidly expanding as water gushed from the dam's surface. Engineers and construction crews scrambled to plug the breaches with dirt and boulders, but their efforts were futile against the unstoppable internal erosion. As the situation worsened, emergency evacuation orders were sent downstream, though many residents had little time to respond. Bulldozers working on the dam's crest were abandoned as a sinkhole opened beneath them, signaling the dam's structural collapse. By 11:15 a.m., officials realized the dam could not be saved, and urgent warnings were broadcast to all communities in the valley. At exactly 11:57 a.m., the Teton Dam failed catastrophically. The wall of earth, 305 feet tall and holding 80 billion gallons of water, disintegrated, releasing a torrent of water traveling over 2 million cubic feet per second. The floods surged down the canyon at terrifying speed, reaching heights of 30 feet in some locations and picked up debris, trees, and livestock in its path. The valley below transformed into a churning, destructive river, obliterating everything in its course and leaving no time for those in its immediate path to escape. The sheer power of the unleashed water scoured the canyon walls to bare rock and tore through towns downstream. Wilford, Sugar City, and Rexburg faced the worst of the devastation, with homes, farms, and infrastructure completely destroyed. By mid-afternoon, the reservoir was nearly empty, leaving behind a trail of destruction spanning nearly 300 square miles. In total, 11 lives were lost, thousands of livestock perished, and tens of thousands of residents were left homeless as the Teton Dam flood etched itself permanently into the history of American natural disasters. In the hours and days following the Teton Dam collapse, the full scale of the disaster became horrifyingly clear. The floodwaters carved a path of destruction across the Snake River Plain, leaving nearly 3,800 homes damaged or destroyed and rendering 25,000 people homeless. Livestock losses were staggering, with over 16,000 animals swept away in the torrent or drowned in the floodwaters. Crops were ruined, irrigation systems obliterated, and the fertile farmland that had once sustained the valley was buried under silt, debris, and mud. Emergency responders faced an almost impossible task. Roads and bridges had been washed out, isolating many communities and delaying relief efforts. Local law enforcement, National Guard units, and volunteers worked tirelessly to rescue stranded residents, provide food, and establish temporary shelters. Hospitals and clinics struggled to treat injuries and prevent outbreaks of waterborne diseases, as contaminated floodwaters mixed with sewage and chemical runoff from damaged infrastructure. The small town of Wilford was entirely wiped off the map, while Sugar City and Rexburg were severely damaged, with buildings reduced to rubble and debris-filled streets. Even towns further downstream were affected, with property damage and flooding extending over 80 miles from the dam site. Power lines were downed, water supplies contaminated, and telecommunication networks disrupted, leaving thousands without basic utilities. Economically, the disaster caused damage estimated at up to $2 billion, accounting for both physical destruction and lost agricultural output. Beyond the financial toll, the emotional and psychological impact on the residents was profound. Families were torn apart, homes and livelihoods destroyed, and communities left to grieve the loss of friends, neighbors, and their way of life. The Teton Dam flood became a stark reminder of the consequences of engineering, miscalculations, and the devastating power of nature when human structures fail. In the wake of the Teton Dam disaster, investigators moved quickly to determine exactly why the structure had failed. An independent panel concluded that the collapse was caused by internal erosion, a process known as piping, in which water seeped through the dam's core, carrying away fine soil particles and progressively weakening the structure from within. The fractured volcanic rock beneath the dam had also contributed, as grout injections were unable to seal the foundation completely, allowing water to exploit cracks and fissures. The Bureau of Reclamation faced intense scrutiny for ignoring warnings from geologists and engineers about the site's unstable ground. Construction records showed that some precautions had been inadequately implemented, and risk assessments underestimated the potential danger of the lowest core eroding underwater pressure. The report prompted major reforms in dam safety practices nationwide, emphasizing thorough geological surveys, continuous monitoring, and the importance of redundancy in safety systems. The Teton Dam was never rebuilt. Today, the remnants of the structure remain a silent monument to the disaster, a reminder of both human fallibility and the tremendous forces of nature. The flood led directly to the creation of the Bureau of Reclamation's Dam Safety Program, which introduced stricter regulations for design, construction, and maintenance of all federal dams. These changes helped prevent similar tragedies and established a model followed worldwide for managing dam safety and risks. The environmental effects were long-lasting. Floodwaters scoured riverbanks, stripped soil from farmland, and deposited layers of debris that took years to remove. The Teton River ecosystem was disrupted, and habitats for fish and wildlife were devastated. Residents who survived faced the daunting task of rebuilding their communities and coping with the trauma of lost loved ones and destroyed homes. Ultimately, the Teton Dam disaster left a permanent imprint on Idaho and the engineering community. 11 people lost their lives, thousands were displaced, and billions of dollars in property and infrastructure were destroyed. Yet from this tragedy came critical lessons about geology, engineering, and human responsibility. The flood remains a cautionary tale of the risks of underestimating nature and the importance of vigilance, planning, and respect for the immense power of water. August 20th, 1910 didn't appear out of nowhere. The stage for one of the worst fires in American history had been set months before. The winter of 1909 had been unusually mild, melting snow early and leaving the northern Rockies, stretching across Idaho, Montana, and Washington, unusually dry. By spring, rivers that normally swelled with snowmelt were reduced to trickles, and by June, the forests were tinder dry. Lightning from dry thunderstorms ignited hundreds of small fires, while sparks from trains, campfires, and logging operations added countless more. The United States Forest Service, created just 5 years earlier in 1905, was still a fledgling organization. Underfunded, understaffed, and largely inexperienced in handling fires of this scale, the agency scrambled to respond. Recruitment posters called for men who could ride for days, fight fires, and survive in the wilderness without losing their heads, a job for the toughest of men. By mid-August, estimates suggest between 1,000 and 3,000 separate fires were smoldering across the region, creating a patchwork of danger too vast for any single team to contain. Smoke thickened the air, the sun glowed dim and red through the haze, and the mountains seemed to hold their breath, waiting for disaster to strike. President William Howard Taft even sent 4,000 soldiers to help combat the flames, but it was like trying to put out an ocean with a bucket. The summer of 1910 was a perfect storm of human activity, extreme dryness, and natural lightning strikes. The forests of the northern Rockies were primed, waiting for the spark that would ignite one of the deadliest wildfires in United States history. Saturday, August 20th, 1910 brought the disaster that everyone had feared but could not stop. A powerful cold front swept into the northern Rockies, but instead of rain, it brought hurricane-force winds with gusts over 70 miles per hour. These winds turned the thousands of small fires into a single, unstoppable inferno, later known as the Big Blow-Up. Flames flattened and raced across the forest floor, while massive trees were uprooted and tossed like matchsticks. The fire created its own weather, sending superheated air spiraling and launching embers miles ahead, igniting new fires that trapped entire crews in seconds. The roar of the firestorm was described by survivors as a sound like 1,000 freight trains, drowning out all thought. Firefighters were caught in a desperate race for survival, with the flames moving faster than a galloping horse. One of the deadliest moments occurred at Setzer Creek, where 28 men in a firefighting crew were overrun and killed in the chaos. Passenger trains scrambled to evacuate towns in the path of the fire. One train carrying 1,000 residents of Avery, Idaho, raced over a bridge surrounded by flames, barely reaching safety through a nearby tunnel. Amid the chaos, Forest Ranger Ed Pulaski became a symbol of courage. Leading 44 men who were trapped in the inferno, he guided them to an old mine shaft. As the fire raged over the entrance, Pulaski used his revolver and quick thinking to maintain order, ensuring that 40 of the 45 men survived. His actions demonstrated extraordinary bravery in a firestorm that moved faster than any human could run, saving lives that would otherwise have been lost in the blaze. After 2 days of relentless destruction, rain finally arrived on August 23, 1910, bringing the inferno to an end. The devastation was staggering. At least 87 people had perished, 78 of them firefighters, and over 3 million acres of forest were incinerated, an area larger than the state of Connecticut. Entire towns had been wiped from the map, and the economic loss, adjusted for today's value, would exceed $1 billion. The smoke traveled thousands of kilometers, darkening skies as far away as New England and leaving soot on ice in Greenland. The fire's impact went far beyond immediate destruction. It transformed the United States Forest Service, proving the necessity of a professional and well-funded firefighting organization. Public attention turned to the heroism of men like Ed Pulaski, and Congress responded by doubling the Forest Service budget. A century-long policy of aggressive fire suppression began, creating a network of lookout towers, access roads, and elite firefighting teams, including the introduction of smoke jumpers in later decades. Yet this policy had unintended consequences. By suppressing natural low-intensity fires for decades, forests became unnaturally dense, allowing dead wood and underbrush to accumulate. This fuel buildup made future fires even more destructive, setting the stage for modern megafires. Smokey Bear, created in 1944, embodied the philosophy of total fire prevention, spreading a message that shaped American attitudes toward forest management for generations. The Great Fire of 1910 was more than a disaster, it was a turning point. It highlighted the raw power of nature and the limits of human control, while forcing a nation to rethink its approach to forest safety, preparedness, and firefighting. The Great Fire of 1910 was a crucible that reshaped both the landscape and the nation's approach to wildfire. In its aftermath, survivors, officials, and communities faced years of rebuilding. Entire towns had been destroyed, and the northern Rockies forests were left scarred and vulnerable. Recovery was slow, with displaced families forced to find new livelihoods, while the U.S. Forest Service struggled to restore the burned areas and prevent soil erosion. The fire also cemented Ed Pulaski's legacy. His leadership during the Inferno became a symbol of courage under impossible circumstances, and his invention of the Pulaski tool, a combination of an axe and a hoe, revolutionized firefighting. Pulaski's story inspired generations of firefighters to prepare for disasters with discipline, strategy, and respect for nature's power. The lessons learned from the fire guided future forest management for decades. Policies were implemented to monitor fire-prone areas, train specialized crews, and invest in early warning systems. However, the fire also illustrated the unintended consequences of aggressive suppression, showing how overmanaged forests could store massive amounts of fuel and become tinderboxes for future megafires. Even today, the events of August 20th to 23rd, 1910 echo through the American West. The Great Fire serves as a stark reminder of nature's unpredictability, the limits of human control, and the need to balance prevention with ecological understanding. It stands as one of the deadliest and most transformative wildfires in history, leaving a legacy of heroism, tragedy, and crucial lessons for modern firefighting and forest management. Central Idaho in the early 1980s was the picture of rural calm. Vast valleys stretched between rugged mountain ranges, dotted with small ranches, farms, and mining operations. Life moved slowly, dictated by the seasons rather than worries about earthquakes. Unlike California or Washington, Idaho had historically experienced only minor, infrequent tremors that rarely made a noticeable impact on daily life. The region's sparse population and wide open spaces created a false sense of geological security. The towns of Mackay and Chalice sat quietly in the heart of this landscape. Mackay had roughly 500 residents, while Chalice was home to about 1,000. Both communities relied heavily on ranching and mining, with main streets lined with historic brick and wood buildings that had stood for decades. Unpaved mountain roads connected the towns, used by hunters, ranchers, and travelers, winding through forests, river valleys, and past foothills that hid centuries of geological tension beneath the surface. Beneath this peaceful scene, immense natural forces were slowly at work. The area is part of the Basin and Range Province, a region where the Earth's crust is being stretched apart at a rate of just a few millimeters each year. This stretching produces deep fractures in the crust called faults, where blocks of Earth can move suddenly when stress builds too high. One of the most significant of these is the Lost River Fault, which runs along the western base of the Lost River Range, including Idaho's tallest peak, Borah Peak. For hundreds of years, this fault had been storing energy. As tectonic forces pulled the crust apart, the valley floor sank gradually while the mountain range slowly rose. Geologists had identified ancient surface ruptures that revealed the fault's active history, but the timing of the next major quake remained completely unpredictable. To residents, the notion of a catastrophic earthquake felt abstract, something that might happen somewhere else. Unknown to them, a massive release of energy was quietly accumulating beneath their feet, preparing to reshape the landscape in mere seconds. Friday, October 28, 1983, began like any other in central Idaho. In Chalice, children walked along quiet streets on their way to school, while in Mackay, shopkeepers prepared for a normal business day. Ranchers tended their livestock in the crisp autumn air, unaware that a catastrophic event was about to unfold beneath the mountains. At exactly 8:06 in the morning, the accumulated stress along the Lost River Fault finally released. Approximately 10 miles beneath Borah Peak, the rock fractured violently, unleashing a magnitude 6.9 earthquake, the strongest ever recorded in Idaho, and the most powerful to strike the lower 48 states in over 24 years. For 30 to 60 seconds, the ground convulsed with extreme intensity. 2 elk hunters reported hearing a deep, low roar before they felt the shaking, a terrifying sound that grew louder as the earth ruptured. One hunter even had to sit down, overcome by nausea and the violent movement. The earthquake did not release energy in one simple jolt. The rupture traveled unilaterally to the northwest, cutting through the crust for more than 21 miles. Along the base of the Lost River Range, the ground split, forming a dramatic fault scarp. In places, the vertical displacement reached 9 feet. Borah Peak itself rose approximately 1.5 feet, while the valley floor on the opposite side sank by over 5 feet. The violent ground motion shattered the landscape. Blocks of earth several meters wide tilted chaotically, producing Mercalli intensity 9, classified as violent. In Chalice, unreinforced masonry buildings crumbled instantly. Tragically, 6-year-old Travis Frank and 7-year-old Tara Leighton were killed by falling bricks on their way to school. Nearby, a woman was injured by falling debris, but was rescued by co-workers. Mackay, located roughly 50 miles away, experienced widespread structural damage. Brick, stone, and concrete block buildings suffered major damage, with facades peeling away and walls collapsing. 11 commercial buildings and 39 homes were heavily affected, with hundreds more receiving moderate damage. The estimated financial toll of the destruction reached $12.5 million. The quake's force extended far beyond the epicenter. Shaking was reported across 8 states, from Oregon to Wyoming and even into parts of Canada. Within moments, central Idaho was transformed from a quiet rural landscape into a scene of sudden chaos. Its towns and natural features scarred forever by the immense energy released beneath the mountains. In the hours following the earthquake, the immediate danger of violent shaking had passed, but the region was far from safe. Thousands of aftershocks rattled central Idaho, some strong enough to topple weakened structures or trigger landslides. These tremors continued sporadically for more than a year, with the largest aftershock, a magnitude 5.8, striking in August 1984, nearly 10 months after the main event. The earthquake dramatically altered the region's hydrology. Groundwater systems shifted unexpectedly as cracks and fractures opened deep underground. Near Chili Buttes, residents witnessed spectacular surges of muddy water erupting from the ground, forming nearly mile-long zones of sand boils and small craters. The Big Lost River swelled as subterranean water erupted onto the surface, flooding pastures and fields. Local infrastructure suffered secondary damage. At a trout hatchery, sediment-laden water clogged supply pipes, killing large numbers of fish. 30 miles north, the Clayton Silver Mine experienced severe flooding as groundwater poured into fractured tunnels. Pumps were quickly overwhelmed, and within 14 hours, the entire 330-meter level of the mine was submerged, resulting in a total loss. Water sources in the region became unpredictable. The Ingram Cattle Ranch lost a primary spring just 2 hours after the quake, while another major spring completely dried up for 8 days before returning with 9 times its previous flow. 2 days after the earthquake, this resurgence triggered a mudflow that devastated over 2 miles of valley land. Even as far away as Yellowstone National Park, the eruption intervals of Old Faithful Geyser were noticeably affected. Communities faced both physical and psychological impacts. While only 2 lives were lost, residents experienced widespread fear and disruption. Reporters and news crews descended on the small towns, sometimes venturing into damaged private property. Helicopters filled the skies, creating concerns over air traffic collisions. The federal government acted quickly. On November 18, 1983, President Ronald Reagan declared the area a major disaster zone. This declaration allowed federal aid to support the rebuilding of Chalice, Mackay, and surrounding communities. Roads, bridges, and essential services were prioritized, and temporary shelters were established to house families displaced by structural damage. Economic recovery was slow. Beyond the immediate property losses, ranchers and farmers faced disruptions to livestock and water supplies, delaying planting and harvesting. Thousands of cattle were at risk, while irrigation systems were damaged or rerouted. Despite the devastation, residents began the painstaking process of rebuilding, aware that the earthquake had permanently reshaped both the landscape and daily life in central Idaho. The Borah Peak earthquake was more than a geological event. It was a comprehensive upheaval of human and natural systems. From structural damage to hydrological changes, from disrupted communities to altered wildlife habitats, the quake demonstrated the interconnected consequences of a major seismic event in a rural, sparsely populated region. The Borah Peak earthquake quickly became a landmark event for scientists and geologists. It was the first major quake in the Intermountain seismic belt to produce significant surface faulting since the 1959 Hebgen Lake earthquake. This made it an unprecedented opportunity to study an active fault in real time. Within hours, teams of geologists deployed portable seismographs and field equipment to record aftershocks and map the surface rupture. Their work allowed them to document thousands of tremors with remarkable precision, providing a three-dimensional picture of the fault system. The 21-mile-long fault scarp that formed along the Lost River Fault became one of the most studied geological features in the world. Scientists excavated trenches across the scarp to examine layers of sediment and rock, a field known as paleoseismology. This revealed evidence of prehistoric earthquakes, giving insight into the long-term behavior of the fault. By comparing past events to the 1983 rupture, researchers could better predict the timing, magnitude, and potential effects of future quakes in the region. Beyond the scientific value, the earthquake forced a reevaluation of engineering and building practices in Idaho and throughout the Intermountain West. Unreinforced masonry structures proved particularly vulnerable, leading to changes in building codes and construction standards. Engineers began emphasizing seismic design even in areas previously considered low risk, acknowledging that inland earthquakes could produce intense surface faulting and significant damage. The event also highlighted the importance of disaster preparedness in rural areas. Emergency services had to coordinate across isolated valleys and rugged terrain, emphasizing the need for communication networks and response planning. Local authorities documented evacuation routes, temporary shelters, and supply distribution strategies to improve future readiness. For the scientific community, the Borah Peak earthquake served as a natural laboratory, teaching lessons about crustal stretching, mountain building processes, and the hidden forces at work beneath seemingly calm landscapes. Data collected during the event contributed to improved seismic hazard maps and a better understanding of normal fault earthquakes. The impact extended to education as well. Universities and research institutions incorporated detailed studies of Borah Peak into geology curricula, using the earthquake as a case study for fault mechanics, aftershock distribution, and surface rupture analysis. Students and researchers alike could observe firsthand how theoretical models aligned with real-world data. Even decades later, the scar left by the earthquake remains visible, a sharp, pale line etched into the base of the Lost River Range. It is a constant, tangible reminder of the power beneath the Earth's crust and the value of ongoing scientific study. The Borah Peak earthquake showed that even remote and sparsely populated regions could experience dramatic geological events, offering lessons in both preparedness and understanding. Ultimately, the 1983 earthquake reshaped not just the land, but the way scientists, engineers, and communities approach seismic risk. It stands as a dual legacy: a sudden, violent disruption for those who lived through it, and an invaluable source of knowledge that continues to influence geology and earthquake preparedness today. The Borah Peak earthquake of 1983 left an indelible mark on Idaho's landscape and its communities. While the human toll was relatively low, with the tragic deaths of 2 young children, the broader disruption was immense. Entire towns experienced structural damage. Unpaved roads were cracked and shifted, and local water systems were dramatically altered. The quake demonstrated how even sparsely populated regions could face powerful natural forces and highlighted the vulnerability of rural infrastructure to seismic events. From a geological perspective, the earthquake provided a rare, detailed look at the mechanics of a normal fault in the Basin and Range Province. The vertical displacement of up to 9 feet along the Lost River Fault revealed how energy built over millennia could be released in mere seconds, permanently reshaping the terrain. Borah Peak itself grew taller, while adjacent valleys sank, leaving a visible record of the Earth's movement. These dramatic changes became a living classroom for geologists and seismologists, shaping studies on fault dynamics and aftershock distribution. The event also left a lasting impression on disaster preparedness and public awareness. It underscored the importance of early warning systems, emergency planning, and community education, even in regions not traditionally considered earthquake-prone. Local authorities, aided by federal agencies, improved response strategies, ensuring that future seismic events could be met with greater speed and coordination. For residents, the earthquake was a reminder of nature's unpredictability and power. The physical scars on the landscape, from the fault scarp to the sand boils and realigned waterways, serve as tangible evidence of the forces at play beneath their feet. Even today, hikers and visitors to the Lost River Range can see these changes, connecting directly with the event over 35 years later. Ultimately, the 1983 Borah Peak earthquake stands as both a tragedy and a triumph of scientific observation. It combined sudden destruction with an unparalleled opportunity to study an active fault, providing critical data that continues to inform geology, engineering, and disaster preparedness. The lessons learned here extend far beyond Idaho, offering insights into earthquake risks throughout the Intermountain West and beyond. The quake reminds us that even quiet landscapes can harbor immense energy, waiting centuries for a single transformative moment. It also reinforces the importance of respect for natural forces, preparedness, and ongoing study. While the Earth moved in just 30 seconds, the knowledge gained from those moments will continue to shape how communities and scientists understand and respond to seismic hazards for generations to come. The Borah Peak earthquake, though fleeting in time, left a permanent legacy in both the land and the minds of those who study it, an enduring lesson in the raw, unrelenting power of our planet.